welcome to the Vin Armani Show. We are streaming live on YouTube at youtube.com/Vin Armani, also on Twitter and Periscope. At Vin Armani is my handle there. We are proud members of the Activist Post Podcast Network, so you can check out all of our audio archives at activistpost.com. Also, you can now check us out on terrestrial, satellite, as well as streaming online at the Liberty Radio Network. That's at LRN-FM. You can check us out there along with many other great programs, including also produced in New Hampshire, Free Talk Live. So go check us out on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM. So it's Monday morning, 10 a.m. Pacific time, and we're back again. We've got a great show for you today. We are going to talk about trust, and specifically trust as it relates to Satoshi's vision. And there's been a lot that's gone on today. We've had or this week I should say, we've had the Italy wanting to get out of the euro. We have had Visa go down in the UK. All of these actually predicted by Satoshi Nakamoto. We're going to get into these particular stories and what they all mean. And to help us do that, to help me get through all of this today, as always, I'm here in New Hampshire. He's in Las Vegas, fabulous Las Vegas. So to help us get through all of this today, my good friend, co-host, and producer, Mr. Christian Reyes. Christian! Christian! No, we have no Christian. Is he there? Can he hear me? I wonder. No. Christian, can you hear me? Can you hear me, Christian? No, Christian cannot hear me. I don't know what's going on with him. He's got no audio, it appears. Okay, so what we will do then is we will just, I guess, I'm going to, while he gets that worked out, it gives me a very good chance because I don't usually get a chance to do this, or I'm ranting, and so I don't do this. So what I would like to do, though, is to say this show has been a labor of love since we first started doing it. I'm actually going to mute Christian here. Christian, you're muted. This show has been a labor of love since we first started doing it, and we have done our best to provide for the next step in liberty, which I truly believe is going to be enabled by Satoshi's vision and by the invention of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency overall. And so through doing that, we have enabled merchant adoption quite a bit, and we've wanted to always stand out. And so people have been very supportive of the show. One of the best ways, actually, besides listening, the only way that you can support the show, because we don't take donations, and we obviously don't charge for the show. We don't run ads on YouTube over the show, so we don't monetize there. That's helped us stay away from being censored. But there are some things that you could do. One of those things is, of course, going to governyourself.com, purchasing shirts. Christian, nope, he's all over the place, so I'll do this myself. Shirts. Here's the new shirts. Read 1984, Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ethereum, and blockchain. Simple economics, Bitcoin Cash, Dash, No Hodl, Individual, Make Bitcoin Cash Again. I particularly like that one. Anarchy Ball. This is a women's tank top. That is the ANCAP tank top. Christian, if you could hear me, give me the thumbs up. I'm seeing you on video. Clearly, he can't. We've also got, those are all at governyourself.com. I don't know. Christian's taking control of the mic there. Governyourself.com. GVRNURSLF.com. In addition to that, this coming Thursday, June 7th, from 7 to 9 p.m., Bitcoin Cash meetup in Las Vegas. That will be hosted by my now beleaguered co-host. I'm watching him struggle on the remote camera. I'm watching him struggle to try to get some audio. Bitcoin Cash meetup hosted by Christian Reyes and gifts provided by Bitcoin.com, the Bitcoin Cash Fund, Baby Vodka, as well as Las Vegas Distillery. That's at Las Vegas Distillery in Henderson, Nevada. It's been very successful. So again, that's Thursday, June 7th, 2018. Christian, can you hear me? Give me the high sign. Okay, so this even goes all the more that it's like this entire show is always a labor of love. But what I think is what's particularly interesting about this topic, and why I'm glad that we got that worked out, but why I'm also not surprised that there were issues, because that's kind of just the way that the universe works. And I'm going to connect you back onto this here. Is
Thank you.
This is maybe the most important topic that I think we've had on the show today. That we've had on the show to date, I should say. Let me reconnect you. To all the audience that is still here, we thank you, and you will be rewarded by this show. It is a particularly important topic. We've never had this many technical difficulties, dude. In like 2 years.
No. Nope.
In 2 years, we've never had these technical difficulties. But I need to drink a tea now.
And as long as we...
But as I was saying, what this tells me is that this is a particularly important topic. It also, because whenever something is important is always when there is struggle. That's how it's always laid out for me in my life. Okay, are you ready, dude?
Yeah, I'm connecting right now.
Okay, good. It also forced me to actually tell some people to go to Govern Yourself and buy some shirts.
Awesome. Awesome.
All right. So here's the deal, bro, and it's good because maybe we can cut right through the euro. Maybe we can cut right through Visa going down. People know Italy wants out of the euro. All right? Mm-hmm. People know because it was big news, huge news. Visa went down. A lot of it was in the UK, right? There were people talking about, oh, well, I just dropped my groceries in the store because I don't have time to go get cash, right? I'm using this electronic payment system. Which, if you think about it, trust, right? Here's this trusted third party that is the Visa network. Now, the Visa network pretty much has never gone down. This has not happened, like not on a mass scale like that. Maybe a merchant will have their own card terminal go down, right? So you have that level of trust. But on the grand level of trust, this was truly bad. And it was truly bad on a level of like, had it been sustained, it could have done some real damage to people. I mean, there are people out there living on credit cards who, for instance, have no way of getting cash advances on their credit cards.
Right.
So while you could go when Visa was down, while you could go and you could withdraw from an ATM, there was no way for you to just use Visa to get the things that you needed. Right? So, and that could be anything. And so many people rely on it. So many people trust it.
Yeah.
And this was a big issue because, I got into several conversations and it seemed to be in the zeitgeist of Bitcoin, a very big topic. Now, one of the things that I think is so interesting, and for people who are interested at all in crypto, but who are not engaging in the online discussions, I think it's much more interesting on Twitter than it is on Reddit. Because Reddit there are more people who are... I feel like Reddit is a lot less of a conversation, and the user interface for it is a lot less interactive in terms of the immediate response, right? Gotcha. It's much more like a forum where somebody responds, then somebody else, and then maybe it'll be 10 minutes later, whereas conversations on Twitter can be happening boom, 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 fast, right?
Real quick.
And so I really like interacting on Twitter in that way because a lot of it, while it can devolve into trolling, right? It can devolve into acrimony. The people who, if you can hold your shit together, and if you can really interact with people with the thought of, I want to try to understand where this person is coming from, even the trolls, like, there's an economic motivation for this individual to be trolling right now. There's some motivation, personal, emotional, economic, whatever it is, for this individual to be trolling. And so if you really go into your head and you're like, what is so important to this person?
Hmm.
Right? Like, I know what's so important to me that I'm involved in that discussion that's happening. Right?
Yeah.
Look, I moved to New Hampshire to be a part of the Free State Project. Like, this is, for me, I want to live it. I want to live liberty. I've decided that I'm going to dedicate the rest of my life to this cause and see how much
Hmm.
more free and prosperous I can make the world. My motivation is like, it's out, it's on my sleeve, and I'm also not anonymous online. But then
Yeah.
people on the other side who are either anonymous or who aren't, and then it's, there were people saying things on the BCH side, like, particularly this week. So there was a couple of things. One was that the BTC side, there's been this movement, Eat BCH, started by this guy Jose in Venezuela. Right
Hmm.
now, I think Jose is really genuinely a good guy. I've seen him interviewed a few times. I have interacted with him on Twitter. I think he's got the best interests of everyone at heart. I think that there are some things about the logistical organization of what he's doing that could be improved, that will actually be better for him in the long run in terms of safety, in terms of sustainability. But be that as it may, I have no question about his intentions.
Yeah.
However, recently, new little Eat BCHs have just popped up because it's decentralized, right? There's no one saying, oh, you're the
Hmm.
only person who could do Eat BCH. You just, the same way that you do a meetup, right? It's the same sort of idea that's like, no one can
Hmm.
say you can't just say at Las Vegas BCH meetup and put a logo up and be like, we're a BCH meetup. There's no
Right.
centralized authority. That's part of the idea. There's no centralized authority.
Hmm.
And one that came up that started to sort of, where I had a few questions myself that seemed like it gave me a little bit of a gut feeling about it, is this one in South Sudan.
Hmm.
And I got a little bit of a strange feeling because I realized, wow, this is actually an opportunity that, say, like the people who have been running these Nigerian print scams, the Nigerian
Yeah.
email scams for years and years and years, this would be a perfect opportunity for them, because what do you need to do in order for people out of the country to send you BCH to your address? All you got to do is you got to go buy some food, take it out to some poor people, not even a lot of food, just a little
Hmm.
bit of food, find some kids who are poor, give them the food, and tell them to hold up a sign that says Eat BCH, and then with the block height of where the thing came from, and boom, you've got a funnel from people in the developed world just sending you money with no accountability. And I was like, I'm not saying that's what's happening, right? I'm not
Hmm.
saying that's what's happening in that particular case. But what I'm saying is that is a that is a model that is ripe to be used in that way by unscrupulous people,
Yeah. Absolutely.
right? Which is pretty much what the idea of Bitcoin is all about. Now, the trolls, the BTC trolls, went after it like, oh, you're exploiting these people, you're doing the blah blah blah. Weirdly enough, on the other side were all of these people who, because I brought it up and I was like, maybe this model could be tweaked a little bit so
Yeah.
that there could be a little more oversight and a little more accountability to prevent the types of things that we should expect if this were to grow. Maybe this could be tweaked. And even people on the BCH side attacked me, or at least came back at me like, well, that would be all well and good, but we need to worry about feeding starving children first. And I was like, hold on, hold on.
Hmm.
Yes, we do need to worry about feeding starving children. And if we
Hmm.
don't handle this model, they're going to not only not be fed, they're going to be
Sabotage.
exploited.
Yeah.
Like, so it's interesting, and it started me, and other things were happening this week where I was like, oh, oh, this is so interesting. I'm seeing what this is really all about. It's about trust. Satoshi
Right.
Nakamoto uses trust over and over and over and over and over again in the Bitcoin white paper. We're going to talk with Derek Magill. He's our guest in the second hour. We're going to talk with him about Satoshi's vision and hopefully about trust because he has been compiling documents from Satoshi for the Nakamoto Institute. And we're going to talk about what that is. The Nakamoto Studies Institute. We're going to talk about what that
Hmm.
is. But Satoshi uses it over and over and over again. And what's interesting, what I've found, and what I'm starting to see is that what separates these two sides and where this fork went. And it even makes sense to me why, the sort of like neckbeard versus cool kid thing.
Yeah.
The idea that it's like, they came out with the boat party, the video from the boat party, and it's like Calvin Ayre going and like water skiing behind a boat, like extreme
Hmm.
sports type of situation, and bikinis and the whole nine. And I'm like, you know what this is? People are either naturally very, very trust or are on a spectrum when it comes to how they approach the world, right? There's people who are very, very trusting. And on that far end, that's not good. That's
Yeah.
very dangerous. We would call it naivete, right? These people are naive. They're gullible. They trust everyone.
Everyone.
That
Hmm.
gets you into a lot of problems, right? That creates heavy risk because that's really what it is. It's trust and risk are directly correlated to each other, right? So it's like, are you risk averse or not? People who are not risk averse, who are happy to risk, who also end up, by the way, with high rewards. That's the thing. Risk, and reward. Hold on. Give me control back, Christian. Stop. 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 Christian.
I didn't do anything.
Oh, that's interesting. Are you moving the mouse?
I'm moving the mouse, but I'm not touching.
Okay, stop moving the mouse, please. Thank you. There you go. All right. People who really, really trust, who are not risk averse, gullible, naive, right? That's what it comes down to. Um, then you have people who are very risk averse, completely untrusting, don't trust
Hmm.
anybody. Well, that's not good either. Because
Right.
what happens in that scenario is that you miss out on every opportunity. Your
Hmm.
rewards are incredibly low, right? You're never going to try to start a business. You're never going any of these things because all of those require risk. And so you see that really what it's about is this is about like temperamental. And when this really came to me was go to this no trust tweet. So I'm having this online conversation, and I said, there's a big difference between, quote, trust no one and, quote, be incredibly discriminating with who you trust. A life without trust is, by definition, a life without love. I'm sure to keep a circle around me of people I trust because their values are aligned with mine and they do care. And then someone wrote back, and this is interesting. The Twitter name is CanX CEO of Hodl Gang. Now doesn't have a lot of followers, but was very articulate and honest in this tweet and said, I don't trust anyone but my immediate family and a few friends. I consider the rest of the world likely to be hostile. Why would I let my guard down? As far as I know, you show clear evidence of being my enemy if you support Bcash. I'm here to watch the old world burn and start anew. I found it. So you come back to us, Christian, if you got it. I found this like fascinating,
Right.
absolutely fascinating. That it's like, and so honest of this person saying, I don't trust anyone but my immediate family and a few friends. And I was like, wow, your life sucks, bro. You don't trust anyone but your immediate family and a few friends? That's really shitty. It's also not actually true, right? This is a perspective that this person hasn't
Hmm.
actually done a lot of introspection because what would that actually mean? That would mean that this person, like what, when you go shopping, like at the store, What do you
Hmm.
think that
Well,
the merchant there is gonna hold you up? Like, do you think that if you go and eat at a restaurant that the cook is gonna like spit in your food? What do you like? How are you approaching the world that you think that way? But but then it starts to make sense about like why would you keep the block size at 1 meg? Why would you
mm,
be so scared
right.
that miners would even if, right? Even we know, even if logically, rationally, you're like, okay, yes, a miner who spent a bunch of capital, their interest is going to be, of course, aligned with keeping the chain safe, which is what people on BCH understand. That it's like, if Jihan Wu has 50% of the chain, 51% of the chain, I don't need to trust Jihan Wu. I just look at his first economic incentives and his past actions. His past actions is he wants to make a profit by mining. He cares very much
Hmm.
about mining. That means he needs to keep the chain safe. He's one of the biggest holders of the currency, which means he wants to see the currency succeed and the price go up. He wouldn't attack his own chain. He would defend it.
Absolutely.
But if you're somebody who your natural temperamental inclination is just to not trust anyone, then of course that would fall on deaf ears. If I said that, that would not resonate with you. Because deep in your heart is that fear like, no, no, I don't trust it. I don't trust it. Everyone is hostile, right? And in a world where
Mm.
everyone is hostile, you want to take, if everyone is hostile, you want to minimize the amount of power that any individual has, right?
Right.
If everyone is,
So,
you never want to give anyone power, even if it's to protect you. Because you always assume, well, I don't know if I can trust this person to protect me, so I need to be sure that they don't have that so much power, right? But what's interesting and what it got me thinking about is, but what does Satoshi say? And it's really between two things. Like go back to that sticker that you had that had gotten clicked. So this is when Lightning first launched. The only thing that anybody could buy is stickers. They could buy them from the Blockstream store. This is from Blockstream store. And one of the stickers that they've got at the store is it says don't trust period, verify period.
hmm.
They also have only one t-shirt. If you go to t-shirt, which is after that, they only have one t-shirt and it says the same thing. On the front it just says a black shirt with white writing. Don't trust period. Verify period. That's the only shirt for sale at the Blockstream store, which is basically everybody's first destination to buy something when they get on Lightning. You come back to us. So, what's interesting about that saying is people think that that's like an old saying, don't trust, verify, because it sounds a little bit familiar to people.
Yeah.
It's not.
No.
There's an old Russian proverb that Ronald Reagan was told when he started to do the negotiations in the 80s to try to do a nuclear arms reduction, right? And they were going to have an arms reduction regime. And one of his aides said, well, you're going to be dealing with the Russians. You probably should know some Russian proverbs. It'll make them feel a little more comfortable if you know it. So he said, this is going to be a good one. It's an old Russian proverb. It's related exactly to this. And here's the proverb: trust, but verify.
Mm.
Trust, comma, but verify. So start from a place of trust, but verify so that you know that your trust is not misplaced. In other words, this is more on the not trust, but don't be naive.
Yeah.
Trust, but verify.
This is a great balance. This is actually a vehicle mind
Yes,
state.
but go back to the sticker. Go back to the sticker. Got it? That is not what is on that. That is not trust but verify. That's actually the exact opposite statement.
Opposite.
It says start from a place of distrust, then verify. Don't trust, verify. Here's the trade-off on that. Here's the trade-off. The trade-off is, and I learned this about trust, particularly being in seduction, right? And then, working, being a gigolo, right? Working in an unregulated, cash-only environment where I was alone with people who were strangers, who I was significantly bigger than, in an intimate situation. And it was like, one of the reasons why I was able to be successful in that was definitely because there was a reality show about what we did. People had seen me. My clients had already
Hmm.
seen me. They already had some idea of who I was, but they walked into it trusting me.
Right.
And I had to maintain their trust and be worthy of their trust, and I always did. So I had clients who I would see every month for years. But what I also learned was that there were some clients who would come into the experience who were on the don't trust side. And one thing is this: if you start from a place of distrust, it doesn't matter how many times you verify, you will never reach a number of verifications where you will trust.
Yeah. 0 times 0 is 0.
Trust can't be earned. Like people
Right.
say, you need to earn my trust. It can't be earned. Trust can't be earned. It can only be lost. It has to be given first, and then you verify to see whether or not you continue to trust.
Hmm.
But once lost, it's lost. And anybody who has had, for instance, a significant other who has cheated on them knows that is the truth.
Absolutely.
Once that is lost, it is never, ever,
Mm-mm.
ever coming back. But if you start from the place where it's already not there, that's why I said a life without trust is a life without love. Because you cannot say, I don't trust you, and say, I love you at the same time. They can't occupy
Hmm.
the same space. They can't occupy the same space. So, what does Satoshi, and we'll talk more with Derek Magill about this, but like, let's go straight to the white paper. So this is the thing. Most people have not read the white paper. And I've read it many, many, many times. But what's interesting is that as this experiment rolls out, and as I start to have these revelations, when I go back to the white paper, I start to see different things
Mm.
in it, right? Like ideas and concepts that had passed me by before now are like, oh shit, this is deep. This guy is well, clearly, whoever this person is an outright genius. And also, whoever this person is a very socially adept and I would say compassionate individual.
Right.
Which again also makes me think Craig Wright is not Satoshi. Let's go to the white paper. So go to white paper here. Now, you don't need to read all the technical of the white paper to know what Satoshi's vision was on this concept. Okay? So, for most people, especially on the BCH side, the most important part of the white paper, this is just the first page, is the title: Bitcoin, a peer to peer electronic cash system. They're like, it's got to be cash, got to be cash. Therefore, Bitcoin Cash, BCH, right? So, of course, the abstract is important from a standpoint of the technical, for sure. On the issue of trust, and particularly on the issue of what is Satoshi's feeling about trust, the introduction is very important. Go to intro here. I'm just going to read it word for word, and we can kind of go into what he was, because the introduction is like, why am I doing this? Is really what the introduction is about. So I'm going to read it for those who either haven't read it or don't know it by heart. And think about the ideas of trust. Here he goes. And really, when it comes to Visa going down today. Commerce on the introduction. Commerce on the internet has come to rely almost exclusively on financial institutions serving as trusted third parties to process electronic payments. While the system works well enough for most transactions, it still suffers from the inherent weakness of the trust-based model. Completely non-reversible transactions are not really possible, since financial institutions cannot avoid mediating disputes. The cost of mediation increases transaction costs, limiting the minimum practical transaction size, and cutting off the possibility for small, casual transactions. And there is a broader cost in the loss of the ability to make non-reversible payments for non-reversible services. With the possibility of reversal, the need for trust spreads. Merchants must be wary of their customers, hassling them for more information than they would otherwise need. A certain percentage of fraud is accepted as unavoidable. These costs and payment uncertainties can be avoided in person by using physical currency, but no mechanism exists to make payments over a communications channel without a trusted third party. What is needed is an electronic payment system based on cryptographic proof instead of trust, allowing any two willing parties to transact directly with each other without the need for a trusted third party. Transactions that are computationally impractical to reverse, this is important, would protect sellers from fraud, and routine escrow mechanisms could easily be implemented to protect buyers. In this paper, we propose a solution to the double spending problem using a peer-to-peer distributed timestamp server to generate computational proof of the chronological order of transactions. The system is secure as long as honest nodes collectively control more CPU power than any cooperating group of attacker nodes. Okay, leave it on there, Christian, because this is super important. He starts out in the first sentence tells you all you need to know about what he's trying to solve. Commerce on the internet has come to rely almost exclusively on financial institutions serving as trusted third parties to process electronic payments. Now the question is, okay, Satoshi, why is that a problem? And what he says it right here. Completely non-reversible transactions are not really possible since financial institutions cannot avoid mediating disputes. So what he's saying is, because financial institutions have to mediate disputes, that means that financial institutions have the ability to reverse transactions, otherwise called a chargeback, which happens all the time. Then he says the cost of mediation increases transaction costs, limiting the minimal practical transaction size and cutting off the possibility for small casual transactions, and there is a broader cost in the loss of the ability to make non-reversible payments for non-reversible services. So what he's saying is that because you can have chargebacks, the total cost of doing business goes up. That's just straight up economics. Right? The merchant has to account for the fact that there's going to be a potential of a chargeback, that, and also at every level. So the bank has to account for that, the payment processor has to account for that, because they're going to need to turn back their commission. So the amount that they charge is going to go up, up, up. Then he says, with the possibility of reversal, the need for trust spreads. Merchants must be wary of their customers, hassling them for more information than they would otherwise need. A certain percentage of fraud is accepted as unavoidable. So basically, you can come back to us, Christian. The big message that Satoshi is saying, the big thing that he's trying to solve, is he's trying to say, look, because we have to trust trusted third parties who are the banks, financial institutions, because they are in the middle of this whole thing, the economic rules that govern their behavior change the rules of the system and what the relationship between the buyer and the seller needs to be. That it immediately makes the seller more distrustful, right? The seller is more distrustful of the buyer because that charge could be reversed. So, meaning, if there's fraud, it's on the merchant's back, right? And moreover, he says, if the merchant has provided a non-reversible service and the chargeback comes back on him, so you imagine you go and you fix someone's car. You're a mechanic and you fix a car and the car drives off. You did all this labor, you had all these parts, and the car takes off, and then you get a chargeback, and this happens. it's not just you're even and you didn't make any money. You actually lost money that now you
Hmm.
have to make up with double the amount. You understand what I'm saying?
Right.
So what he says is that that system makes sellers not trust buyers. See, Satoshi is a fan of trust. He understands that trust is important. He wants buyers and sellers to be able to trust each other.
Hmm.
And he says, look, this is the system that will enable it to happen. He's a fan of trust. Go to this third party thing. This is important because this is what he says that this is his solution to that issue. What is needed is an electronic payment system based on cryptographic proof instead of trust, allowing any two willing parties to transact directly with each other without the need for a trusted third party. So, he's trying to get to a situation where, although third parties are not needed, and any two willing parties can transact directly, you can come back to us, Christian. He's not saying that there should be no third parties at any time. What he's saying is that third parties are not mandatory.
Hmm.
Mandatory. Because there's an even bigger risk. So you have the situation of what it does to the market, but then pull up this regulatory capture thing. Because the banks are in the middle of all of this, because the banks as trusted third parties are required by the current system, then you have the risk of regulatory capture. Now, what is regulatory capture? Regulatory capture is a form of government failure which occurs when a regulatory agency created to act in the public interest instead advances the commercial or political concerns of special interest groups that dominate the industry or sector it is charged with regulating. So this is when you get into things like the SEC. You come back to us, the SEC,
The
the federal
there
the
you go.
Federal Reserve, right? These are these quasi governmental agencies, and all of the banks are quasi governmental.
Hmm.
There's this relationship between them. You remember the Treasury Secretary in 2008, Hank Paulson, was a former president of CEO of Goldman Sachs. And so Goldman Sachs got a bailout, and their competitors
Hmm.
got crushed. Lehman Brothers, Bear Stearns. This is regulatory capture. He's supposed to be regulating these banks. No, he's rewarding them.
Yeah.
And this is what happens when the people don't have choice, when there's not a free market. When there's a free market, you're going to have trusted third parties. I mean, even in crypto, Coinbase is a trusted third party. They do
Right.
quite well. I think most people trust that Coinbase is not going to steal their money. Coinbase could steal everybody's money. Every exchange could steal everybody's money. There is a risk with it being in there. But without those exchanges, without that liquidity, Bitcoin would be nowhere. Without the ability for people to go en masse easily from fiat to crypto, you would not have the liquidity in the crypto market.
Hmm.
You would not. And the hodling would make you nothing. So the trusted third parties are necessary for it to grow, but they are not necessary for you to interact with me one on one and do an exchange should we so choose.
Right. And I'm thinking back to that sticker.
Mm-hmm.
If they're saying don't trust, verify, without the trust first, it's you can't verify. Is that correct? Or
Yeah,
yeah,
because
right?
if
So
you
that doesn't even make
it
sense.
doesn't. No, this is the point. It's not, but it's not logical because what it's ticking off is it's ticking off an emotional trigger.
Right.
In the same way that, you know, we're feeding starving kids is ticking off an emotional trigger on the other side. To where it's like,
Hmm.
I'm not saying not to feed starving kids. I want to feed starving kids too, which is why I want to make sure that you're not sending your money to somebody who is not feeding starving kids because you think
Right.
he is. Like, trust, but verify.
Hmm.
Let's add a verification layer. It is not a verification layer that all that I have to do is I have to write down on a piece of paper some words, literally on a piece of paper, as low tech as it gets. Or one of them tried to show me a receipt. Oh, here's a receipt from us buying the food. It was just like a cash receipt that you could buy anywhere, not with the business name or anything like that. Like that you could
Yeah.
go down to the stationery store and buy, and then with some numbers filled in. And I was like, what? What is that? That does it? What the person? If a person was actually just pocketing this money, what they wouldn't take 5 minutes to write up a fraudulent receipt? This is what kind of proof is this?
Yeah.
Which is exactly what the blockchain is there for. Like, how can we utilize this technology to actually provide some verification that this is what's happening so that we can get a little more verification so that we can continue to trust you? We trust you now. Let's verify. Trust but verify. It's not don't trust, right? So let's blaze through this. How do we know Satoshi was worried about regulatory capture? Well, here's the Genesis block. That he specifically was worried about that idea, that financial institutions being in control. Click on that. There we go. Because he wrote it right into the Genesis block, block 0. He wrote the headline of the day, Times, 3rd January 2009, Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks. Bailout, exactly as we talked about. Now, here's the dangerous part of this whole thing. So come back to us, dude. I want to lay this out, and then I want to go through what happened on the BTC side that I think is a portent of something bad dealing with this trust issue. It's reached a point where this don't trust is so high, like now it's being leveraged. They're leveraging fear, right? Because that's what don't trust
Hmm.
is. When you get into a mode where you're like, I accept this. I accept that fear is the norm. I accept that I need to live in a state of fear. Very, very fucking bad things happen. This is how
Hmm.
authoritarians always come into power. How did we get the TSA groping people? How did we get the Patriot Act? How did we get the war on terror? It was because after 9/11, people were fucking scared. Everybody was like, let's
Hmm.
do it. Let's do it. Let's do it. We accepted it. There was no. Why? Because we were scared. Fear. Right? Now, I saw this a while back and I put up this tweet. And I've been referencing it a few times. This 24 months. 24 months. 24 months. After the
24.
Genesis block. Third line. You got it. Close. There
Oh,
you
there
go.
we go.
I said within the next 24 months, the BTC hodler troll army will begin calling for governments to regulate BTC in order to, quote, protect the value of their token. I said that November 17th of 2017. I said within 24 months. So what happened this week? Put up this Lombroso thing. I ran across this tweet. Eric Lombroso, who's a core dev, well respected among them, he said, I would rather trust a public official subject to checks and balances than trust a secretive concentrated mining operation. In other words, I would rather trust a government official than a Bitcoin miner.
Wow.
And this is a core dev. This is people contributing code to the Bitcoin Core platform, which is mining software. Then he put up a poll. Nope, that's the final. Yes. He said, if it came down to this choice, who would you rather trust? Public officials with checks, I don't even know what that means, or secretive big mining operations? Then the poll started going. Luke Jr., the insane other core dev, said, only 90 votes so far, but I have to say it's strange and scary. So many people so far prefer secretive big mining ops over public officials. Really, Luke? It's scary to you that people would prefer Bitcoin miners to public officials, to government officials? I think Satoshi clearly, as we just saw, preferred uh, mining. He was a secretive mining op. Satoshi was literally a secretive mining op. We don't know who he was, and he mined the first blocks. Then here's Luke Jr. as well. This is from a while ago. A maybe a week and a half ago. He said, public service announcement. If someone has a full 50% or greater hash rate for your cryptocurrency, there is no number of blocks where confirmation is safe. Once you get behind 50%, you can reverse an unlimited number of blocks. What happened to B Gold can be done to BCH or maybe Bitcoin if Bitmain wants to. The most interesting part about this is a person who used his mining operation to do 51% attacks against Coiled Coin and Barbecue Coin, which up until recently were the only documented 51% attacks on coins that anybody knew anything about, giving a public service announcement about what Bitmain might do. Like, well, yeah, maybe you don't trust them because you're a unprincipled criminal yourself.
Exactly.
Of course a criminal doesn't trust. Of course a criminal's not going to trust me, an honest person. They're always going to think everybody's a criminal because they're a criminal. Then here was the final of that poll, by the way. If it came down to this choice, who would you rather trust? With 1,343 votes, thank God, 58% said secretive big mining operations. Only 42, so almost 60 to almost 40 public officials with checks. But I tell you what, that 40 is scary. Christian, you could come on back to us. That 40 is pretty scary because that's the entire reason for the invention of Bitcoin. Is to not have to trust public officials. It's to not trust financial institutions, which you can't tell the difference between the two, right? Mm-hmm. Italy wants to get out of the euro. Why does Italy want to get out of the euro? They want to get out of the euro because they have no control over their monetary policy in their country. They want to do something different. See, but the answer is not to secede down to just a country. The answer is to secede down to the individual, where you set your own monetary policy. That's what Bitcoin is about. And if a mining operation gets too big and secretive, then you fork. You start a community, and you fork, and you mine it yourself. You find trusted people, you put them around you, and you use it in that way. That's the power of it. That's the power that he was giving. But it also gives you the power to decide. To decide to have some trusted third parties, because you know what? I do believe that Coinbase, I mean, now they're going to give up information to the feds. But they fought it, and I believe that they really, genuinely fought it to the best of their ability, because I don't think that their intention is to steal anybody's money or to let the government take anybody's money. I don't believe that. I think that you can look at economic incentives, and while people are not completely rational actors, I think that you can sort of get a risk profile of like, is it more or less likely that this person is going to steal my money? And the funny part about it is like, the things where it's unlikely are the things where it's like, well, can I verify this or no? Mm-hmm. You can verify everything that Bitmain does. You can verify every single block that Antpool mines. They can't hide it. You can trust, but verify. You verify. You can verify how much hash rate they have on the network. It's all verifiable. Now, I can't verify whether or not the money that I sent to Eat BCH South Sudan actually got into the bellies of those kids or the pockets of the person. That I can't verify. And so it's like, what we need to realize now, as non-technical people particularly come on, it works like this. If you can't write enough code to yourself at least build your own SPV wallet, where you're 100% in control of the code and you understand it all, no one can update it on you because your wallet can get updated in your phone.
Yep.
Your Bitcoin.com wallet, your Jax wallet, your Coinami wallet can just have an update. You don't know that malicious code wasn't put in there. You have to trust. You have to trust that the wallet maker is not interested in doing that, which 99.9% of them are not. Now, there are ways to verify, of course. It's exceedingly difficult if you're just dealing with an auto update from the Apple Store. Exceedingly difficult. There's a lot of trust in this space that has to be there. And so I think that it is. Look, this is why I've been saying for a long time, I don't think that the anonymous trolling, that anonymity is going to be very valuable in the future. Because
Well, also too, what I was thinking is trust can be lost due to lack of knowledge.
that's right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So,
Well, so this is why economics is so important. And this is why going back to the white paper is so important, because if you
mhm.
just get the white paper, you're going to understand so much about economic incentives without having a whole economic background. And then you can understand a little bit and then actually play in the laboratory that is Bitcoin. And
Mhm.
that's what makes this movement and this technology so important. We're going to talk a little bit more about that with Derek Magill, who we're going to have in just a few moments. I'm going to go ahead and bring him up. Christian, why don't you go ahead and take us to break, and we will be back with Derek Magill of Nakamoto Studies Institute.
The spirit of art. The spirit of technology. The spirit of individuality. Baby Vodka. An ultra-premium spirit conceived by Vin Armani. Handcrafted and distilled in Las Vegas by master distiller George Rotz. Each bottle, a celebration of the individual, custom engraved and hand-signed by the creators. Each element blending in harmony to create a beautiful experience beyond imagination. Baby Vodka, the spirit of Vegas. Created by Vin Armani. Tailored by Christian Rays. Available for purchase exclusively with cryptocurrency at babyvodka.com.
Welcome back to the Vin Armani Show. We are streaming live on YouTube at youtube.com/Vin Armani, also on Twitter and Periscope. At Vin Armani is my handle there. We are proud members of the Activist Post Podcast Network, so you can check out all of our audio archives at activistpost.com. You can also check us out on satellite, on terrestrial radio, and streaming online on the Liberty Radio Network. That's on lrm.fm. You can visit lrn.fm. So before we get to our guest, I would like to talk to you just for a moment about countermarkets. Countermarkets.com, trends and strategies for maximum freedom. Our new issue, the June issue, is out tomorrow. My article is the part 2 of my saga with the city of Las Vegas in opening a, let's say, semi-agorist art gallery and event space in downtown in the Arts District. It was quite a saga, and honestly, that particular experience with the state and the bureaucracy in particular is some of the reason, well, a very big reason that I'm in the position that I am now. It really put lit a fire underneath me to show my libertarian bent more in public. So you can go and check out that story. You can get your first issue for free at countermarkets.com. We appreciate all of the support. We're in our second year now, so it's great. We've already got people who are repeat subscribers. It's a lovely thing. We're happy to bring you all of the great content that we have in Countermarkets, trends and strategies for maximum freedom at countermarkets.com. So with that, we will get to our guest, Derek Magill. Derek Magill is an entrepreneur and writer focused on the education, career launch, and Bitcoin Cash industries. After dropping out of college during his sophomore year as a classics major, Derek worked in the firearms industry and started a marketing company that worked with companies around the United States. He's currently the director of marketing at Praxis, and in 2018, Derek founded the Nakamoto Studies Institute. He has been a guest lecturer at the Foundation for Economic Education and the Institute for Humane Studies and has spoken at dozens of conferences and universities internationally. Derek Magill, welcome to the Vin Armani Show.
Hey, Vin, thanks for having me.
Thank you for being on. We had a few little technical difficulties, but I think that we've rounded the corner on that. So I'm very I'm very excited to have a nice interview, and your video looks it looks good coming in from there. Where are you at right now?
I am in Southern California.
You're in Southern California. Okay. Well, let's get some more volume on you. So it's interesting. You have one of the few bios that I have seen that specifically mentions dropping out of college, and I know that you're a part of the whole movement over there with Praxis. Talk to us a little bit about why you. It's rare, so I think it's remarkable. Talk to us about your feelings about education and why you think that's perhaps not a knock anymore in today's day and age.
Yeah, well, you can hear me all right?
It's a little low, but go ahead. We'll fix it in the mix. Go ahead.
Okay, so I was traditionally public schooled, and I always, just hated that. I mean, growing up was in public school, I was a good student, but I found it miserable. I really never wanted to go to college because I never was able to make the connection between why somebody would that they did that degree and why somebody would hire me because of that degree. For me, it was like, okay, so, from a very early age, everybody's going through the exact same motions. Everybody's doing the exact same things. I've been in class with people who have the exact same background and experience levels, and I've gone through the exact same courses as me my entire life. This isn't going to change a whole lot in college. What is it about that piece of paper that actually, signals that I'm a valuable person? And I was never really able to make that connection. I went to college because I wanted that intellectual experience. Very quickly realized at the University of Michigan that I was not going to get that experience. And, decided basically that, I would drop out during my sophomore year. I could learn more quickly, learn more effectively, and learn obviously more cheaply on my own. And then over the next couple of years, the things that I realized were that, there's an economic principle behind college degrees. It's a signaling mechanism. Employers want to know that you're more valuable to them. You're going to create more value at their company than you take out in salary. Now, once you realize that, you can start to understand that there's a difference between the expressed desire or expressed preference and the actual preference. So when people say I want a degree, they don't really mean I literally want a degree. They mean they want to satisfy that underlying desire, which is I want to know you're valuable and competent and you're going to create value for me. Well, if you know that, then you can start figuring out how to signal it in other ways and signal it in better ways. And for me, that was a combination of writing. It was a combination of doing free work. It was a combination of having a personal website, going on podcast interviews, doing public speaking, writing a book, and building a portfolio of work and a body of projects that when I went to employers, I could say, here's what I've actually done in the real world. And that became my credential. And so, the reason I say I use college dropout in my bio is because, I truly believe that having a college degree today, if that's what you're relying on, that's about the laziest signal you can possibly have because there's so many better ways to do it.
Okay, I'm dealing with a few little audio issues over here. You're super low, but we're gonna try to get this thing worked out. So talk to us a little bit. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Ah, okay. That is actually significantly better. Okay, great.
Good.
Great. Okay, so let me get this here. I'm dealing with 50 things at once. Everything decided that it was going to go. Everything decided it was going to go crazy today. So Talk to us a little bit about. We've been talking today about Satoshi and Satoshi's vision, and you went ahead and started the Nakamoto Studies Institute, which, if you could tell people a little bit about, first off, why you thought that this was a worthwhile project, and then tell us a little bit about how it came to be, because it almost, as I understand it, it's kind of a fork, if I'm not
Yeah.
misunderstanding it, which is just so perfect for this space. Talk a little bit about how this idea first came to you.
Yeah, well, so I mean, the idea itself kind of has its roots in, back in February of this year, I launched, or really late January, I launched a Bitcoin Cash resources page on my website. And, that got a lot of attention. It was basically videos and content that I think is valuable if you want to really understand the value proposition of Bitcoin Cash, as well as the history behind it, the history behind the scaling debates, some of the history of censorship, and some of the, the players that you might want to follow in the space. I launched that, and actually one of the people who liked that and was using it regularly reached out to me and kind of proposed this as a project. He said, "I'd love to have a place where these emails and this content are hosted that is an unbiased place." I think the Satoshi Nakamoto Institute, which is the institute we forked from, has been a valuable resource, but unfortunately, as I've sort of seen what has gone on. It doesn't appear that they really understand Satoshi's vision really, really well. And so I wanted a place to host this content, to also host some additional content that they are not hosting, that really is a spot for people to go and actually read Satoshi's writings and put them in the broader context of what Satoshi's vision actually was. Because I think that if you actually go through Satoshi's writings, it's very clear that the path, the roadmap that Bitcoin Cash is on now is the one that he originally envisioned for Bitcoin. Now, the reason it happened now, and the reason that I guess I did it at this point was because Daniel Krawitz, who was really the founder of Satoshi Nakamoto Institute, as well as the lead contributor. I mean, if you go to the website, I think he's contributed something like 70 to 80% of the articles on their website. And these are articles that are sort of, I would say, are foundational texts in a certain sense to the Bitcoin intellectual sphere. He was, sort of, I think, unceremoniously, ousted from the Satoshi Nakamoto Institute. He was certainly treated very unfairly by the people at that organization, who sort of decided that they would engage in what I would say a public smearing campaign of him, while at the same time continually cashing in on all of the content that he wrote for the site, which is arguably the reason the site became popular in the first place. So I saw that. I wasn't really happy with the way he was being treated. I love his videos. I love his content. I think he's a great guy. Him and I have been talking quite a bit recently. And I thought, this is the time to do it. This is really the time to actually get this thing up. And so, we launched a couple weeks ago.
So, we've talked on this show and with quite a few people, and I talk online all the time about sort of the connection, or it's not even connection, but almost like the analogy of what it is that, and I don't think we fully know yet what Bitcoin, and particularly the Bitcoin community, is. Like, I really don't think that we have a word for it yet. I mean, I've talked with Krista Rose quite a bit about using the word religion, but it's clearly not a religion. It's something. It's not necessarily like an ideology politically, although it has elements clearly of both of those. And I think that one of the things that separates, that maybe makes it a little more like religion, at least the early parts of religion, is its ability to have these forks where individuals can sort of take it in the direction that they want to take it in. So today we were talking about trust within Satoshi's vision, particularly within the white paper. It's a word that he uses a lot, obviously, and it's a word that it makes a lot of sense within Bitcoin, because trust is such a huge such a huge aspect of it. There are other concepts, though, within this, clearly. We'll talk about trust, but I wanted to hear from you, your thoughts on just the idea of finding and archiving these documents, and why you feel, or your thoughts on why this could potentially be important, or at least why it's important to you moving forward.
Well, I mean, I think that reading Satoshi is increasingly important, especially given, I think, the direction that the core community has taken, the sort of ideology of Bitcoin. I think reading Satoshi himself is the best way to sort of cut through the BS, let's say. I mean, you were talking about trust, for example. I think that term is very abused today. I think the points that you were making are pretty much spot on. And I think the only way to really clearly cut through it is to go to the source of the things that they're saying and realize, look, like what Satoshi was saying was not this. I mean, and maybe an example that's not related to Satoshi is actually even the whole concept of like hyper-Bitcoinization. That's a term today that is used by a lot of people in the BTC space as sort of a catch-all argument. It's sort of an essential part of their dogma. And if you talk to Daniel Krawitz about his article, and you actually read the article, you realize it's more of a thought experiment. It's not like this is a guarantee that this is going to happen. It's like this is painting a picture of what could happen. And that has been, really bastardized into meaning something that it doesn't. And I think, the same thing with the writings of Satoshi. Now, in terms of what we're doing at Nakamoto Studies Institute, one of the problems that has existed in the past with reading Satoshi's writings, the problem that I encountered when I was going through the writings is that when they're linked online, there's no cross-references, there's no tagging system, there's no very simple way to search, for example, how many times did Satoshi mention the word trust? Or how many times did Satoshi mention the word micropayment? And what are all the things that he said about those things? So that's really, the value prop that I think we're adding on that website is, cross-linking, tagging, commentary, searchability, a way for you to actually very quickly hone in on particular keywords and topics that you might want to learn more about that can lend a lot of clarity to this space.
Okay, so, obviously people know about the white paper. I think most people, even with the passing sort of experience within the space, know the white paper. But also, a lot of people think that that's this kind of the sum total of where the information that we can gain it can be drawn from. And I find it particularly on the core side that, I will say something and somebody will be like, you need to read the white paper. Well, I've read the white paper a lot of time. I feel like I understand the white paper. But, people will say, you need to read the white paper. But obviously Satoshi was around. We know that he was interacting with other people in that particular cypherpunk scene, clearly because he handed off the project. So can you just talk for the people who don't know how much is out there about Satoshi? Can you, or that is his actual writing? Can you talk about like where these discussions were had, who they were had with, where you're finding them, how you're acquiring them, etc., just to give an idea of the scope of the writing?
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a bit of it. You wish you had more. One thing I'll say, interestingly enough, this question of is Satoshi, how much was Satoshi interacting with other cypherpunks? Going through the emails, going through the forum posts and the early history of Bitcoin, I've actually come to the conclusion myself that Satoshi was not interacting with these cypherpunks much, that he came to the ideas for the white paper, certainly, without even going to people like Wei Dai's B-Money or Nick Szabo's BitGold. He had already basically written the white paper, at least the first draft of the white paper, by the time he contacted Adam Back And Adam was the one who forwarded him to Wei Dai, who wrote, B Money back in, I think, the 90s or the 80s. That was, people sort of consider like a precursor, or and certainly a foundational text in the cypherpunk movement. And Wei Dai himself says, I was the one who told Satoshi about BitGold. So Satoshi, I think from those kind of communications, you can see he probably wasn't necessarily in this cypherpunk scene because he didn't know a lot of the texts that are now referenced. Now, he did reference those things in the white paper later on. He referenced B-Money, and he said in a forum post later on that BitGold was, that Bitcoin was an implementation of Nick Szabo's BitGold. But I think it's clear that he had wrote the white paper and then went out and got those citations, as opposed to studied these things, then wrote the white paper. Now, in terms of the amount of material available, I mean, these are through a combination of public emails that were done on a mailing list called the cryptography mailing list, as well as forum posts on places like the P2P Foundation and the Bitcoin Talk forum, which was the forum set up by Satoshi, and really for a number of years served as like the hub of everything going on in Bitcoin. I mean, you can go through that. You can see conversations with Satoshi and Gavin Andreessen and, all these, early people involved. And there's a ton of fascinating material. But I would say, in terms of the number of emails, at least that we have public, definitely, no more than 50 or so. Forum posts, I think there's certainly a couple hundred. Now, I've reached out to a number of people to see, if they're willing to share some additional private emails. Obviously, Mike Hearn made a lot of his private emails public not too long ago. We're in the process of archiving those, and those are fascinating. But most of Satoshi's writings come through a combination of those public emails and those forum posts.
Okay, in regards to so Satoshi isn't interacting with, let's just sort of run this down as you understand this. Satoshi isn't really interacting in the cypherpunk community per se. He's coming up, at least initially, he's sort of coming up with his basic concepts, and then he's reaching out to the cypherpunk community, and then he's sort of using some of the things that they were doing already to manifest these concepts. Do you have a grasp, or is it in sort of, have you found a thread throughout some of the early communications that gives you any indication about where these notions came from, about sort of where Satoshi was coming from? Was he primarily a cryptographer? Is he primarily interested in it from as an experiment? Is he more of an activist about it? What is his? Does he have an axe to grind? What do you get from him in sort of those early emails? And how is he, in addition to that, or how is he regarded as he sort of presents himself on the scene? How is he regarded by these cypherpunks? What do they think about him?
Yeah, that's a number of interesting questions. So I think it's difficult to say, like, from Satoshi's writings himself, maybe whether he was a cryptographer or not. I don't think he was a very gifted cryptographer. I think Gavin Andreessen himself said that Satoshi was not a cryptographer. I would say that he was definitely someone with a deep understanding of economics. If you look through his writings, there's at least a few times where he references things like libertarianism and socialism. So he explicitly says, for example, in one communication that I'm not a socialist, and I really don't care about the wealth distribution of Bitcoin, which is interesting because a lot of times it's brought up like, Bitcoin needs to be decentralized by the number of addresses and the percentage of addresses that are holding the majority of the coins. He basically says that it's not really that important to me. He says that Bitcoin itself is very attractive to the libertarian view. He says that in the cryptography mailing list. Now, in terms of the reaction that people had to him, I think it was mixed. I mean, one of the first email responses to Satoshi really kind of predicts the scaling debate that later on would happen and become so hostile. The guy actually responds and says, "Look, this is a neat idea, but it's really not going to get us to where we want to go." And the guy actually says, "I can envision something similar to, a layer system where you would have a, base layer of the Bitcoins, and then you would have, a lightning fast, it doesn't say lightning, but a fast, transaction layer on top of that. That was a guy named I think it was James A. Donald. So the reaction was mixed. Now, Satoshi's response to all of these people was basically, no, you're wrong. We are going to be able to scale this. Here's how it can scale. This is where concepts like Moore's Law get brought up, and, references to Visa and payment processing. It's very clear from these early emails that he really was envisioning an on-chain scaling solution. Now, whether that is possible or not, I think it is. I think it still, remains to be seen, but I think we have better evidence to suggest that on-chain scaling will work than we do to suggest that second layer solutions will work.
So you say Satoshi had a deep understanding of economics, and I'm seeing as I said earlier in the show, I really do see this as probably the most interesting thing that one could be involved. Obviously, I'm biased towards this, right? Because I was attracted to it from a very early time, but as one of the most interesting things that someone can be involved in, because you sort of get to see the creation of both economies and money and cultures play out in this very, very small and very, very transparent time frame where all of the players involved are there. Something that you really don't, you don't have these sorts of records even available from earlier times. There's letters from the Rothschilds and things like that during that time, but it's not on this level where you could see average people and you could see where ideas come into play. What I'm seeing play out is very much what I would say is trust in technology versus trust in the laws of economics. Trust in what machines can do, or trust in the trends in human behavior. Do you, as you get a reading, particularly of the early Satoshi, before he's trying to defend necessarily the technology, which I know that came around in the mix, do you see him as? Do you see? I guess there's two ways of looking at this, and maybe you could flesh these out, or maybe you could present examples of either or both, or how you see it. It seems to me that this is either an economic experiment with a technical component, or a technical experiment with an economic component. How do you see Satoshi approaching this? Is it economics first and let's find the technology to match it, or here's this technology that can do this thing and the economics just so happen to back it up, and here's why?
Yeah, but I think he came from it first, and I don't want to obviously project too much, but I think it's if you look at the introduction to the white paper, I think he recognized there's an economic problem that can be solved with a technical solution that really still is deeply woven and bound up with economic incentives. When he's writing the white paper, he's talking about a very specific economic problem, which is commerce on the internet, and the reliance on financial institutions to be the ones you have to trust in order to transact effectively on the internet. Now, the interesting thing, and you sort of touched on this too, I don't think when Satoshi's talking about trust, well, number one, he's speaking about trust in a very specific context. He's speaking about it in the context of commerce on the internet. He's not speaking about it, all trusted third parties everywhere at all time. He's speaking about a very particular issue, which is money and commerce and transacting online. And he's also, I don't think it's clear anywhere that he's against trusted third parties. I think he's against the, sort of systemic trusted third party where you're not able to opt out of it. He wants, if there is any forms of trust, it needs to be an opt-in, at least in the economic sense, in the sense of money, it needs to be opt-in trust, not something that, you have to use in order to do things. But that doesn't mean that trusted third parties are not going to be valuable in in an economy. I think they will be. I mean, I think that's one of the mistakes people have taken, which is really taking Satoshi's writings to mean that he was a crypto anarchist who wanted no trusted third parties anywhere ever. I don't really agree with that position, and I think even if you look at like his writings, one of the things he mentions about Bitcoin was that this is not solving politics. Like, this is not going to topple governments. It's not going to like make some huge crazy revolution in politics. It's just one step to getting to a freer society.
I think that's an important point about that it's not solving politics, but yet, as we've seen, it actually introduced an entirely new, shall we say, political battleground. And I think that it's an important political battleground because it's a political battleground that potentially is going to determine what the future of money is for. Do we know how long? I mean, we really don't know how long. It's the type of system that while it will definitely fork, at the number of forks over the period of time is going to decrease, and it's an innovation that could potentially stick around, 1,000. I truly believe could stick around 1,000 years. We're going to reach a point where it just works, and people are as used to using it as they are used to gold. So, I wonder about your thoughts. You bring up Satoshi talking about politics. In the context of that, he was very prophetic in terms of how this thing would play out economically, right? And sort of how the structure of the nodes would be, how the miners would start to consolidate. What does he say about how human beings will potentially change, or what human conflicts, or how do you perceive that? Does he address it? Is it even in his head? Is it something he's concerned about, worried about, thinking about? Is there any evidence of that, or is this something that came out of this that was completely unforeseen by its creator?
Well, I think. No, I think it's very clear that he foresaw a lot of things. So one of the most brilliant innovations in Bitcoin that's not talked about a whole lot is like the difficulty adjustment algorithm. Like, this is like a crucial economic point that he made with the difficulty adjustment algorithm. So, I think like traditionally when you have a resource that is growing in value, what happens is that more and more people invest money into actually getting that resource. That resource's supply is increased, and that creates sort of a limit on the value that it can reach. So like if gold's price is increasing, people try to go dig up more and more gold. The market becomes a little bit more saturated with gold. What happens with Bitcoin is like the exact opposite. Like, as the value increases, as more people try to mine, like, it gets harder and harder and harder to do it. And whether you have a couple miners or whether you have 10,000 miners, the same number of Bitcoins are still going to be produced every single year. That's a very important economic insight, and it allows the system to be, the hardest money, I think, that we've ever had. So that's I think, he doesn't say it necessarily directly that that's what he's doing, but I think that's you have to have that understanding of human behavior and markets in order to actually code that into the system. Now, what he says about human behavior, it's difficult. I haven't seen a ton of things. One thing he does discuss actually is that he says this line, which is really interesting. He says, people might become increasingly tyrannical about block space, which I thought it was interesting. He used that word tyrannical. Not that people would just be concerned about scaling the system, and that they'd want to make sure that block space was optimized, that it wasn't getting clogged, but that people would become tyrannical about what is allowed in the blocks or not. I think that was sort of a predictive statement, that it wasn't something that he was necessarily looking forward to. The way I saw it was this could potentially be a problem. So that's one aspect, I think, of predicting human behavior that he saw. I'm not sure if I've seen as of yet. Now I'm still I've read most of his stuff in the past, but I'm still kind of re-going through a lot of it as I re-archive it. And, if new things come up, I'll continue to point them out. But that's one of the most interesting ones that I've seen.
So one of the things I know he talks about, and I'd like you to, if you could get into it a little bit, because it seems to be there's always a new sort of, there's a new thing. And this week it was, this week was truly scary to me with Lombroso making these statements and doing the poll. I would rather trust a government official with checks and balances. The fact that he said with checks and balances, like that makes any difference. Trust a government official than what do you say? A secretive mining. I forget what term, but basically a secret consolidated group of miners. That was, of course, what the scaling debate was fundamentally about. You would think that would be solved on the core side, because that was their entire reason for not increasing the block size. That if they didn't increase the block size, then you couldn't consolidate mining. But yet they seem to be concerned about mining consolidating even with a 1 meg block size, which is like, I thought that wasn't going to happen over there. What did Satoshi, if anything, because I'm sure as you play out the logical progression, I think everybody could see that it's a legitimate thing to maybe not be concerned about necessarily, but it's like, yeah, these things tend to consolidate. I mean, that's how the economics of mining works. If you look around, there aren't that many mining companies in the world, or oil companies. They do tend to consolidate. What did Satoshi have to say about this? Was it brought up? When was it brought up? And what were his thoughts?
So I've actually seen the core people, and this is, I think, still relatively fringe, but this is how these things start, talking about reducing the block size, if anything, to 200 kilobytes or something like that. I mean, that's, to me, just absolute madness. I mean, fanaticism. And regarding this question of minor consolidation, I think it's fantastic. I'm not worried about it at all. I mean, for me, like, this is exactly how markets play out. Like, the whole goal of a market is to get a monopoly. You want people competing for monopoly level profits, monopoly of industry. As long as it's happening in a free market without the use of force and people are actually able to compete, this is a great thing. Now, Satoshi was very clear that this exact thing would happen. Mining was supposed to be a professional, industrial industry. It's not, your mom and pop Raspberry Pi in your basement. This is a professional industry securing the network. And this is brought up very, very early on, where he says, essentially that in the beginning, it'll be very easy to, mine on your own, devices and stuff like that. But, given the difficulty adjustment algorithm, long term, mining will become something that is done with, professionals on big server farms. I mean, he predicted all of this, and he did not see this as a bad thing, and nor do I think we should. I think that division of labor is one of the most important aspects of decentralization and of creating a secure network. And I think, we're seeing the effects of what happens when you try to deprofessionalize your mining network. I mean, this is what happened with Bitcoin Gold. Recently, they were 51% attacked. And I think that, if you look at that, that might be a red flag for people who want to, get rid of ASIC mining, for example, or, increasingly decentralize mining. For me, decentralization, I think for Satoshi as well, when you look at this, decentralization was not an end in itself. It's not like a god that we need to worship and push for, above anything and everything, all other considerations. Decentralization was one tool to achieve censorship resistance. So the perfect level of decentralization, that should be determined by the market. It should not be determined by a group of developers. The market will decentralize as needed to protect the system. There are economic incentives at play to help this happen, but is it going to be the level of decentralization doesn't need to be centrally planned. I think Satoshi understood this, and this is why he wasn't bothered by professionalized miners. We don't need perfect decentralization. We just need enough to protect the system. And we need, accordingly, we need economic incentives and people who want to protect the system. And who is that? Well, that's the miners. These are the people who are investing, millions and millions of dollars into equipment to validate transactions and create blocks.
So, something that I think is not talked about very often, but that I've always found to be a feature and not a bug of Bitcoin and the way that it works out is the idea of forking. And we talked about you talked about that miners will become consolidated. I know that there is always a worry about, and Satoshi himself is trying to create a system to maximize the reward for honest actors and to punish dishonest actors. Really, not even punish them, but just sort of make the economic incentives such that being a dishonest actor is like, why would you even do it in the first place? It's so much more profitable to be honest. And yet there is still always the possibility of a fork, whether that's to fork off from forks naturally happen. There's orphan blocks and whatnot. I mean, it's a natural part of the technical side of the system. I'm talking more about the cultural side of the system, like we saw happen with any of the Bitcoin forks, particularly the ones that didn't start with the Genesis block, but actually forked off from a particular block and moved the chain forward. What does Satoshi say, if anything, or I mean, it doesn't have to be direct, but is this something that he's concerned about? Is he does he recognize it? At what point does he recognize it, or do others bring it up to him, or is it just something that is so much part of the system that it's taken for granted?
That's a really good question. I think as I understand it, at least his ideal was for most of the stuff to happen on one chain. But I think that's more of a long-term thing, not necessarily a short-term thing. I mean, you don't create an open source software and say that you're against forks. I just think that assuming that is a pretty ridiculous thing. Forks are a systemic part of Bitcoin, and that's not going to go away. And for me, I'm not concerned with a fork. Like, a fork is a great thing because everybody involved, I think, is protected. You get issued the exact same number of coins, and a fork can only succeed by creating more value for the investors and for the people involved in the system. It can only succeed by doing that. So, for me, forks are a great thing, and I certainly don't really see a whole lot of things from Satoshi, criticizing forks, and I really wouldn't be able to say much more than the fact that, he released an open source software. You don't do this without understanding that there can be forks.
So, in terms of people going and wanting to dig in and read, I know that you guys are putting together some indexing of these things. Is there for someone to just sort of get a whole view of Satoshi's vision in terms of a starting point? Obviously, there's the white paper, but do you think that the best way is to do that sort of index, just look for it as you want something, or what do you think is the best way to travel over time? Are there particular conversations, back and forths that he was having that you think are potentially a good starting place for somebody who's looking to really get a handle that on what his vision is? Where do you think are the sort of the starting places? How should somebody approach this material?
Yeah. I mean, the cryptography mailing list emails, I think, are definitely the best place to start. I might even start with those emails before the white paper. That's what I did, and I think that I found that more valuable. So, those series of emails, there's like 14 from Satoshi. And then there's obviously a bunch of back and forth as well, but he quotes most of the relevant parts of the back and forth in each of his emails, so you don't necessarily need to read the back and forth with other people, though I do think it's interesting. So I would say the cryptography mailing list emails that are hosted on the site, the My Current emails are very fascinating as well, and obviously the white paper. Beyond that, you can certainly go into the forums. Those are, I think, sort of a hit or miss. There's a lot of really interesting conversations in there, but one of the things we're going to be doing on the site is making it more easy to find the stuff you're looking for. So I think once you've read those essential things that I just mentioned, from there you can start to click on the tags that are listed in those pieces of content. You can see Satoshi mentions the word micropayment, for example. You can click that, and you're going to be able to find forum posts as well as other emails that he actually referenced that stuff in. And I think that beyond that, that's probably the best way to go about it. There's so many forum posts, it's not necessarily valuable to just read them all straight through. And the tagging system and the search system will help you find anything. But most of the essentials are already, I think most of the essentials, at least of his vision, are spelled out in the emails themselves. Now, there's interesting things in the forum posts. There's one conversation, for example, where he talks about raising the block size. When we should raise it, he gives basically an equation to kind of determine when to raise it or not. But he was very clear, like the block size should be raised over time. I think that's a very interesting one, for example. And there's a number of other stuff in there as well.
So to kind of end off, this is fascinating, by the way, and I think that it's going to be very important for there to be individuals like yourself that are archiving this and that are able to speak at least with, although it's not supposed to be proof of authority, we are still human beings and there is division of labor, and someone has to have this knowledge readily available, or at least be able to point people to where it's at. I think that's hugely important, and I think you're doing very important work that honestly, potentially could decrease, and I think will decrease, the amount of acrimony and maybe even potentially violence. That I really do think it's something people have not thought about. There's a lot of money at stake here. There are some things, violence and money do over time tend to follow one another.
I have, I've been, threatened in various ways as well. I have people regularly trying to hack my Twitter account, trying to hack my Patreon account. And this stuff only happened when I got involved with crypto Twitter. I think, the animosity is only going to increase in the short term. And I certainly agree with you that, there are very real potential for either, violence from individuals or, violence from the state. We've already seen people like Samson Mao trying to, get people reported to the SEC. We've seen lawsuits or attempted lawsuits against Bitcoin.com. We see a culture now developing among core, like you mentioned earlier with Eric Lombarzo's tweet, that these people trust the government more than they do private business. That's a huge cultural problem, and I think that people who are speaking out should really be careful about and really understand, like, there are going to be consequences for this kind of stuff, and that are the result of this philosophy in the core camp in particular.
I agree 100%, and I think that it's up to those of us who want a more peaceful and prosperous world to remember that is the end, and that Bitcoin is supposed to be a means to an end, and not an end in and of itself. So, but speaking of ends, I think we've come to just about the end of our interview, which was great. Thank you very much. Can you tell people where they can find you and the Nakamoto Studies Institute if they want to learn more?
Yeah, so my website is derekmagill.com, DerekMagill. I write a good bit about the ongoing conflicts of Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin Core on that website. You can also visit, of course, nakamotostudies.org. That has all the emails, and the forum posts. We're increasingly adding more content, and I hope to be, for the most part, finished with the archiving process in the next couple months.
All right. Excellent. Excellent. Thank you very much. Derek Magill, founder of the Nakamoto Studies Institute. Thank you so much for being on, and we will see you again. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Ben.
So, Christian, are you
Yep.
back? Oh, there
I'm
he
back.
is.
I just couldn't hear him throughout the interview.
Yeah. There's we've this new studio, man. I knew eventually, a few weeks in, we were going to run into some issues. You know,
Yeah.
it's the way things go down. But overall, yeah, I guess you're just going to have to go back and listen to the interview yourself, dude.
Yeah, I got to listen to it.
So, Christian, I think we've just about come to the end of this. I thank you for sticking in on this whole thing, and for doing such a great job of handling the board, even though you couldn't hear him.
Yeah,
Which,
thank you.
I guess that means that you could do this deaf now. Strange.
Right.
But you know,
Yeah.
it's interesting to me. You know, I learned a long time ago in studying sort of the Eastern approach to medicine is that often the universe is weird in a way that kind of like attracts like. And you know,
Right.
what we had today was communication problems, right?
Yep.
It was first I couldn't hear you, then his sound was messed up. I had to keep adjusting his sound, and it was like you couldn't hear me, then I couldn't hear you, then
Weird,
nobody could
right?
hear him because it was too loud or too soft, and I had to increase that. And I think that there is something to be said for the idea that, like, we need to start listening to each other. And we need to start
Right.
really hearing each other and really approaching things with compassion. Like,
Right.
I this week really did come to the realization that I need to not expect that others will have the same level of risk aversion that I do. That's really, honestly, especially for me, that's not fair because I am a very much a risk-taking person. I don't take
Right.
stupid risks, but I take a lot of risks. And I'm willing to take risks and I'm willing to take losses to get the gains. And it's so far it's on net in my life. It's worked out very, very well. But I can't expect everybody to do that, nor would I want everybody to do that.
Right. What's interesting too is like this whole show was about trust, and I really believe that trust will come from, or will, how can I say this? Is trust and communication go hand in hand. So, especially in relationships, and in relationships being relationships with money, relationships with yourself, relationships with others,
Sure.
trust will depend on, or let's say the verification of trust will depend on proper communication.
Oh, 100%. If you can't hear I mean, that's what Bitcoin is based on. The whole
Yeah.
entire idea is communication. The whole entire idea is that the communication is so good that thousands of nodes in a network are able to share the same data, are able to reach consensus on the same blockchain and do it into eternity. And that one to many communication, that precision of communication is what gives it its value in the first place.
Right.
It's what gives it the power in the first place. And so, you know, the nodes are seeking to understand each other at all time. The nodes in the network. Except in the meat space. In the meat space, we're not seeking to understand each other. You know, we believe that we understand Satoshi's vision for ourselves. But maybe Satoshi's vision is broader than that. Like, maybe Satoshi's vision has all of those things in it. Maybe Satoshi's vision has a place for the people who are so naive that they trust sending, you know, their money off to some person in
Right.
in South Sudan, and they trust that, oh yeah, I'm going to send Bitcoin, and for sure they're going to go buy food with it and pay people. And then on the other side, people who literally say, I don't trust anyone. And I think everyone else is hostile, and I want the whole world to burn down. And yet we're all Bitcoiners. And we're all in this. And if we do it right, it is going to bring around a paradigm shift. But we just have to realize what is the type of world that we want, and to maybe each to take a little step towards the other one, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's where consensus is, to take a little step in and see the point of view of the person who wants less, who has less trust, and instead try to bring them out of that fear, right?
Mm-hmm.
As an example, not to literally come back at them as an enemy and to be exactly what they thought you were in the first place. And then on the other side, it's the same thing, to not just discount people who, you know, would say, well, maybe you don't just want to be, I know you're trying to feed starving kids, but maybe you don't just want to be sending your money. Don't look at them as an enemy who doesn't want to feed starving kids. Maybe hear why they're saying that.
Yeah.
And I think that if we can start to each approach each other, that as we move forward, we're going to need that level of communication. As more and more people come onto this blockchain, these blockchains, and as more and more of these blockchains gain in user base and in value, we're going to need to start talking to each other, man, because we got to live on the same planet. And we're all fundamentally part of the same culture. There are some bridges to be made. So we're going to try to do that next week with Joel Valenzuela from Dash Force News. He's going to be on. We're going to be talking about Dash and I'm trying to make a bridge between BCH and Dash, man, because the bridge already exists on the ground here in New Hampshire, particularly among merchants and users. I'm trying to make the bridge because there's a big bridge. That's one where we should not be enemies, where there's a lot more that we have in common than differences. So Joel's going to be here, and
awesome.
And that's this week, dude. So, whew, we somehow made it through the show. Thank you for today.
You.
Let me say goodbye to the people. Thank you guys for joining us. Thanks for struggling through. I'll probably take this episode and just go over it and possibly edit it down and post it back up. But thanks to all of you who stuck through and stuck in, and I'm glad that we were able to make it work. Interested to hear your comments, your ideas. I think that we really should be carrying on this conversation because it's an important one. This is really about the future of money, and the future of money is the future, period. It's the future of our culture, it's the future of our society, it's the future of governments, politics, all of it. So we are going to be back next week. But in meantime and in between time, you can, of course, check us out at activistpost.com. Check out our audio archives. You can listen to us on terrestrial radio, satellite, and also streaming online on the Liberty Radio Network. That's at LRN.FM. So we will be back next week, 10 a.m. Pacific time on Monday. And until then, stay free.